Welcome back to season 3 of Talking Candid. I think it's no surprise to anyone that you sort of exited Rise at 7. One of the things that you said in your post when you announced that you was leaving is that being a founder almost killed you.
When you have that kind of pressure, I think everyone copes with those things differently. And I think sometimes you can start to use coping mechanisms that you don't realise that that's what it is. You don't realise that's what you're doing. The big turning point was the start of the pandemic. Everything looked a little bit shaky. We got a message. This is a client who has signed a 12-month contract to do this with us, and maybe it's all going to be okay.
It's really hard in digital PR as well, and particularly switching off.
Yeah.
And actually taking time away from digesting social media, the news, whatever it is.
When you're at home, working from home, living at home, you don't get out of the house. Work just sort of starts when you wake up and stops when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So those kind of always-on tools like Slack and WhatsApp and whatever were really sort of hurting us, I think, as people.
Because you could be switched on like 24 hours a day digesting. And it was so much worse in the pandemic.
And it's always bad news anyway, right? There's a turning point, or there was a turning point for me really, where it was like we'd got to our sort of goal, really, what we wanted to do. We had conversations about where we wanted to take the business next, and I wanted to sell it. Carrie loves Rise at 7. That's where she wants to be. We had a really good relationship where I felt able to say, if I stay, this is not going to end well. I need a hard reset.
So, welcome back to season 3 of Talking Candid. And today we have a really special guest, Stephen Kenwright.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
I've genuinely, admittedly, I've been following your journey for quite a while now. So it's really lovely to meet you and sort of have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, wonderful to be here. Likewise, big fan of Candid Sky. I've seen the awards arriving, and I think they look well deserved.
Yeah. Have you been on a judging panel before?
I have, yes. I have judged you.
Oh, really?
Yes. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. You sign NDAs and stuff, but I think I can say, yeah.
Spoiler alert.
We'll just check it, and if not, we can cut it.
It's fine.
I think the two that we've actually won recently is the Global Search Awards, and they were really fun to be part of.
Congrats.
Because it was big recognition, but
yeah.
Always love a good award. To be honest, though, admittedly, I do get a little bit fed up of attending them now. Because it's like, the same sort of 3-course dinner. You have to dress up, and I think I've probably been to like 50 award ceremonies in my career.
Oh yeah,
so
humble brag there.
Yeah, I'm a little bit bored of the.
Okay,
you're not going to be invited back after saying.
No, honestly, I'd just rather let the team go if needed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really good to have you on today, and I think. I've been looking at some of the recent podcasts that you've done, some of the things that you've been getting on at Ride Shotgun as well, and some of the interesting things you've been doing. And I think a lot of what, I guess you talk about in the podcasts that you've done previously is about marketing and the digital PR industry and what's going on. But I want to learn a little bit more about you and sort of the journey that you've been on. So for the listeners, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about sort of where your journey began in marketing, digital PR, and sort of how you've gotten to this point, I guess?
Okay, well, I think like most people in marketing, I didn't mean to be in marketing. That wasn't my dream. That's not what I wrote down when I was at school, that I wanted to be a marketer. But I did. So I actually was going to go to uni to do physics, and it sounded too much like maths. And I was doing a tour of some student accommodation, Sheffield Hallam, where I ended up. And there was a girl there who said, if you do English, you only have to come in for 6 hours a week.
Right.
So I switched and I did English, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was so scared of going to work that I did a master's degree because I just didn't want to leave. And then just by complete coincidences, I ended up doing some copywriting, because that's what you do. If you do English, you do copywriting.
I did English.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. or you could be a teacher, right? That's your other career path. And I was doing some copywriting for a small agency. It got acquired by a facilities management company, of all things. And they just needed a full-time copywriter. So I moved to Greater Manchester from the other side of the Pennines for my first job. Did a bit of everything, like some ad copy in the sort of traditional posters sense, and booklets and leaflets, and print ads and that kind of thing. I did some packaging, but I also did a bunch of SEO. And SEO in those days, meaning that I wrote 30 articles a week about bifolding doors.
Nice.
In different ways.
Yeah, that was the way back then.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know a lot about fire doors. So I did that to begin with, and I got made redundant from that job, not because I was terrible at writing about fire doors, but because, this shit happens. And I wanted to go into SEO properly and join a pure play specialist SEO agency, because I felt like that's something that I really was interested in. I think when you were really young as well, you're quite idealistic. And my idea of SEO was, well, people are already looking for it. It's not like we're trying to sell them shit that they don't want. They're literally looking for what we're doing. And that felt quite nice and warm and fuzzy, instead of please buy this crap that I'm doing, from an ad point of view.
Yeah.
So I went to Branded 3 as it was at the time, which was an SEO agency in Leeds area. And I was there for, in different roles and growing with the team quite quickly, but in different roles for about 7 years. And, that's really where I kind of learned most of the stuff I know, I would say. And certainly everything I know about SEO. It's a very good team and a bunch of people that, have gone on to great things as well, I think.
Is Branded 3 part of Kin & Carter?
Yes, well, kind of.
Yeah.
So it was bought by St. Ives, which became Kin & Carter.
Yeah.
And as is often what happens with large networks, we got merged into another bit of the network, and that bit actually got sold off. So I think that the people who would maybe still be there within that network are not in that network actually anymore. They're in Salacin. It's a completely different network. But yes, it became Kin & Carter. Kin & Carter had been bought again, and now Valtech.
I saw that recently, because I used to work at Amaze Realise, which was
cool.
part of Kin & Carter.
Yes.
And I used to work with, I sat next to Richard in the SEO team. I think
world.
You may have known of him. He was my line manager.
Yes. So I was Richard's line
SEO.
manager at
really?
Rise at 7. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, and we worked
so
together
cool.
a little bit. So Branded 3, Amaze, Realise, sister agencies, and we worked together a little bit.
Yeah.
Made it over to Amaze every now and then.
Yeah, because Richard hired me.
Yeah.
And I sat alongside him in the digital PR team.
Cool.
I didn't have much involvement in digital PR up until that point, because a lot of my experience was just in, social media marketing and email and website and SEO.
Yeah.
So I was like, what's digital PR? I love seeing all the fun stuff they did there.
Yeah.
They did like this collaborate. Well, they always came to the SEO. They worked closely with the SEO team, should I say, on like ideas, because like Lloyd's Banking Group did like lots of calculators and things, and then they had the Saucy Fish Go as a client, and then they was like, okay, well, can we do any brand collabs? And I was like, oh, you know what? I don't know why at the time I was like, you can do a collaboration with Monty Bojangles, the chocolate truffle company. And everyone was like, oh, why? That's a bit interesting. I was like, well, you look for dessert after your dinner. Probably a terrible idea. I don't know what the impact was, but we ended up doing a brand collaboration, and we had like loads of like cooked fish and chocolate truffles in the office at the time. And that was like my first experience with digital PR, and I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
My favourite Amaze Realise one was when they got the Manchester City squad to voice the trams. So like where you're getting off, it's Vincent Company telling you where you're getting off the tram and stuff like that. I imagine Manchester United fans would have been livid, but that's part of the fun. That's why it was good.
Yeah, and it gets a lot of press as well, and a lot of attention, But yeah, that's it is a small world. That's awesome. And sort of where have you gone from there? Like, so from Branded 3, obviously you had a huge, big success at Rise at 7. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Did you expect it to be such a big success at the time when you sort of left your previous role?
Yes, is the short answer. There's a long answer though. I actually had a little bit of time in house in between, and that's why Rise at 7 really happened. I'd gone to Pendragon PLC, which is Stratstone Evans Halshaw car dealerships, to head up digital there, because me and my wife were going to have a little boy, as it turned out. And agency life pre-pandemic, especially when you're, on the board or whatever, you're in sales, you're in the hotels like all the time, and in the network as well, because the offices were everywhere. I was just out on the road, so I wanted to go in-house. Didn't work out. I was trying to hire Carrie at the time at Pendragon. And so when it was clear that wasn't going to work out, she was applying to be on The Apprentice and was in need of a business plan. So we worked together on that, and then just we should probably do this. This is a decent business plan. And I think you're really good at this. And, you know, it just felt like it was aligned in that way. But the plan that we had is kind of what we did. So yes, expected it to do good things. It went way faster than I thought it would. We had loads of luck in the sense of the pandemic really benefited Rise at 7. We had a bunch of traditional retailers on the books like Matalan and Cath Kidston and Halfords, who all of a sudden have gone from 90% of the revenue being store-based into all of the revenue being online, and being so slow at actually getting new agencies on board. Like, well, we are the digital agency, so we ended up with all of the work quite quickly for a bunch of those brands. So lots of luck. And also I had completely underestimated how hard Carrie works. Like, she is online working 20 hours a day, pretty much. So, you know, clearly it was, faster than I thought, but there was a plan behind it.
Yeah. What about the first client? Like the kind of the first one that you got, like, how did you go about doing that? Because I think for a lot of people I've known anyway that have kind of stepped away from working inside of an agency, it's a terrifying thought, like, where am I going to get my work from? How did that play out? Because it was quite a big client that you won, wasn't it? The first one.
We had a few early successes. So we had one, which for legal reasons I'm still not really willing to say who it is. I assume the heat is off now, but I'm not going to say it anyway. But we had a founding client who backed us and put some money in. So it was quite low risk to do it. Like, the worst case scenario is we're going to be this guy's in-house marketing team. So, you know, that was one of the benefits. We also had CE Safety, which is he's actually a sole trader. Gary, he was a great guy, but literally came in via my personal email and said, "Can you do some stuff?" Like, you probably need some digital PR as well. So $2,500 a month to kind of top things up. So he was officially our first client, Gary at CE Safety. But like the early ones, we had a couple of old relationships from Branded 3 Days, like Your Golf Travel was a really early one. And then the one that really kind of put us on the map was Misguided, which was after about, and Matalan as well, right? Because Matalan was, the first bit of work was probably a month in. And that's also terrifying, by the way, when you're like really young as a business and you have to deal with procurement and they're asking for things. I had to send them a screenshot of our bank account to prove that we had an actual business bank account. Which, when you're an established business, you're just like, yeah, we could probably, you know, be fine with procurement. When you're brand new, you've got to jump through all sorts of hoops. And then Misguided, the way that really came about was the whole deal was negotiated in the Manc SEO Slack channel.
Really?
So Sam Pennington, who was the head of SEO at Misguided at the time, I was speaking at Manc SEO, and he messaged saying, "Actually, we're looking for something a bit like you. We've got a proposal from someone, another agency, which turned out to be absolute mega bucks." And they were like, "We're not really sure about it. What would you do? Can you just send us some like prices?" And we decided that what we would do is we just kill it dead there and then. So we ran a campaign for ourselves that we thought would be like what Misguided would probably do. Carrie did how much could Love Island celebs, participants, contestants, human beings, whatever, how much could they earn on Instagram? And it was like a standard thing that I think has been done probably 10 times.
It's like tried and tested formula.
Maybe it had been done before, I don't know. But yeah, she did that, and she got interviewed on BBC News for that. And
no way.
And so we're like, so this is what we think we'd probably do for you. Here is a screenshot of Carrie on BBC News, so we can show you it probably works. And then we're like, when we came to the kind of pricing side of things, like, this is what I would have charged you at the last agency. This is what I'm going to charge you now. Because we're made for each other, basically. And Sam went out of his way to make sure we won that for sure. Like, every few days, he was like, "Chief Commercial Officer is asking me this question. What should I say to him in the DMs?" So that's how it came about. I think you've got to, and I think that's true of agency sales anyway. You've got to have an advocate, someone who really wants you to win. Yeah, but we were really lucky with that.
That's really interesting to hear, because I think externally, like a lot of, you know, and I know a lot of different agency owners around Manchester and, you know, around Derbyshire, because that's where I'm from originally. Everyone kind of looks at you guys and thinks, damn, how did they do that so quickly? And how did you get so big so quickly? So it's really interesting to hear kind of the stories about it. Going on from there, when, you know, as it started to get bigger and bigger, how was that? How did that feel?
It was... the big turning point was the start of the pandemic, I think, because we'd been going pretty well. We'd been growing kind of as we'd expected, like, because coming from Branded 3, we were used to working with similar sized retainers. It wasn't like this is all new world with brands that, you know, we couldn't have imagined in terms of the kind of scale, but they were cool brands, and we'd never worked with cool brands before. We were very much financial services and business to business and that kind of thing at B3. So that was a bit different for us. But when we got to the beginning of the pandemic and when we'd moved home and out of the office and everything looked a little bit shaky, and it was probably 2 weeks into lockdown proper, we got a message from a client, Raisin, that we'd won, basically. They'd signed a contract, they were happy to go ahead, and we were doing some work with them in the UK and elsewhere. And that was the first point where we thought, this is a client who has signed a 12-month contract to do this with us, and maybe it's all going to be okay. And there's this really weird period at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone's just like writing blog posts about how they're just, you know, don't worry about it, everyone's going to be okay, we're just surviving, etc., etc. And we were starting to see just like a massive influx of cash really, really quickly. And we kind of took a decision. We were quiet for a little while because people were quite upset with people who were marketing at that point in the early days. With good reason, right? There was a lot going on in the world. But as it started to become like, well, this is kind of it now. We're going to be here a little while. And as we needed to recruit because we had the work for it, we're like, we're going to have to turn it on again. And that was quite interesting, this kind of decision of, you know, the early stages with existing clients where we need to show them a long-term plan. What's going the world be like when you come out of this? And we need to show you what you're doing right now. And me and Carrie are very different people. I'm like, what's the long-term plan? How are we going to deal with this in 12 months? And she is like, what are we doing right this very second? So having that team was very helpful. But then when things just started to come around again, you know, again, we were probably quite risk averse as a business. Or risk tolerant, the opposite of risk averse. We were quite happy to just, what's the worst that could happen? We'll get panned a bit. And I think, you know, that is one of the stories of Rise at 7 as well. Like, you should be prepared to get panned a bit.
Yeah. And did you ever experience a time where, you know, because obviously there was that big rise during the pandemic and there was a lot of brands who started to benefit from kind of the work from home situation we found ourselves in. How did you find like building a business and a team when people couldn't necessarily be close to each other and be in a physical office environment? Was that challenging?
It was odd. We'd made a decision early on that regardless of what happened, and we were still like 9 months old when the pandemic started. We made a decision that however long it took to the other side, we're going to be in office. Whether it's in office all the time, who knows at that point whether that's going to be the thing, but we were going to recruit an in-office business. So although we were recruiting in a big way in lockdown, we were recruiting people who were close by, who we would one day be in the office, and we're having the conversations at that starting point of the interview process. And so we always kind of planned for that being the thing, but over time we kind of just pivoted to being able to do the onboarding thing remotely. We took it very seriously as well. And the whole onboarding process was designed very carefully with a few people being quite involved in how it would work and not just kind of, we think this is what we should probably do. We gave it a proper review and it was a well-oiled machine. So I think the downside of it is we had Slack at the time.
Yeah.
And I used to really hate Slack, and then now I have Microsoft Teams, and I didn't realize how lucky I was. But
I hate Microsoft Teams.
They're just the constant. Someone wants you, and they think that they can get you, and that's okay to a degree. But it meant that everyone was on all the time, and when you're at home, working from home, living at home, you don't get out of the house. Work just sort of starts when you wake up and stops when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So those kind of always on tools like Slack and WhatsApp and whatever were really sort of hurting us, I think, as people. Culturally, like that's kind of what Rise became, and it was hard work. I think a lot of businesses turned into that. And so, we made the decision eventually to just move off Slack,
Yeah.
shut it down, move to email.
It's really hard in digital PR as well, and particularly switching off.
Yeah.
And actually taking time away from digesting social media, the news, whatever it is. I mean, personally, I have to be really strict with like when I switch off from work, because you could be switched on like 24 hours a day, digesting the news 24 hours a day, and it's just not good. And it was so much worse in the pandemic.
It was. And it's always bad news anyway, right?
Yeah.
But yes, yeah, I feel that. And you've got this kind of underlying negative current in digital PR, Twitter, RIP, that didn't help either, I think, during that time. So you could, at any point of the day, look away from your screen to a different screen and see something negative coming at you live. That was hard for sure. And I think in PR, that's much worse than it is in most disciplines. Yeah. Digital marketing generally, right? We're very social media focused, so we all see it to a degree. But PR is, it's a tough one.
Challenge.
Yeah, I think that's something we struggle with as well. Like, the whole working from home stuff was kind of relatively easy in a way, because we'd already had like working from home policies even before the pandemic, albeit it was not as widely accepted by people in the team. There was always that perception of, oh, you're working from home, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I think the pandemic changed that in a lot of ways. But we struggled a lot with sort of instant messaging things. And like, I mean, at the time I was in an apartment. So, and we had a 2-bedroom. So one of the bedrooms was my office. But I also used that room for like, if I wanted to play PC games or something. So it was like really hard to switch off.
Yes.
During those times. And I don't know, the kind, I mean, at least for me, it always felt like that I had a mission to be able to like work the most hours because it was such a testing time. And I think it's the same case for a lot of people in the industry, where they had to put in those extra efforts because they had team members who were made redundant or were let go or what have you. But yeah, it was a very, very challenging time. So, but I think we all went through similar things, didn't we? I think so. I don't think it's no surprise to anyone that you sort of exited Rise at 7. You was quite open about it on LinkedIn. One of the things that you said in your post when you announced that you was leaving Rise at 7 is that being a founder almost killed you. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that?
I think when you have that kind of pressure, and the not just the pressure of like, I don't want this to be a woe is me thing at all, because it's not. I think everyone copes with those things differently, and I think sometimes you can start to use coping mechanisms that aren't real. You don't realize that that's what it is. You don't realize that's what you're doing, and particularly because when we started Rise, my wife was 4 months pregnant. We had our little boy. I remember the time during proper lockdown where it would be, I'd wake up with him at 4 or 5 o'clock. I'd look after him till 9. I'd hand him over. I'd work. My wife's like in the next room. Have you finished yet at 6 o'clock? Because she's had a little baby for 9 hours who doesn't want to be put down. And then I'd look after him for a couple of hours, and then bath time, bedtime. And then, 9 o'clock is the first time you sort of think at all. And then he's up 2 or 3 times in the night. And that's repeat for days and weeks and months actually on end. You just sort of like find different ways of coping. And for me, it was, I did absolutely no exercise for 2 years. Like I barely moved. I joined the gym next to the office at the beginning of 2021, at the beginning of 2020, and I didn't even go. The whole year I didn't go. Best intentions, but I just didn't do that. I drank a lot. I would typically drink at lunchtime. I'd come home, I'd drink some more, and don't really realize that's what I'm doing. So, there's a turning point, or there was a turning point for me really, where it was like we'd got to our sort of goal, really, what we wanted to do. We had conversations about where we wanted to take the business next, and I wanted to sell it. Carrie loves Rise at 7. That's where she wants to be. She's designed it exactly how she wants it. And right, so if she was going to exit, what she'd do the exact same thing again. So there's no point. So it was that conversation of, right, okay, so if I'm going to stay, do I feel like in a fit state to stay? And I didn't. So we had a really good relationship where I felt able to say, if I stay, this is not going to end well. I'm not, I need a hard reset. So that's kind of what happened, really. We had that conversation, and I came out of the business completely. It took a while to make that happen, but it wasn't until like didn't have to think about anything, didn't have to deal with any of the situations that were kind of arising, that I was able to, and by the way, I'm not like a recovering alcoholic per se. I think it's helpful to sort of identify that's the way things are going, and know yourself well enough to know that you can or can't change that in the current situation. If you can't change it in the situation, you have to change the situation, I think.
And how long did it take you to sort of realize that? Like, what was the turning point where you was like, okay, this is, I need to do something here and step away?
So in the greatest irony of Rise at 7, I watched an episode of The Source that I was never on The Source. Right. You could watch back the whole thing.
I've seen a couple episodes.
I'm very rarely on it. But I watched an episode. I thought, I look dreadful. Absolutely terrible. The combination of lockdown haircut, I shaved my head and everything.
Did you?
And just like, wow, I am huge. I look miserable. And, I know I'm on camera, so I'm trying not to. So therefore, I must look even more miserable than that most of the time. I just thought, that's not the way I see myself, really. So yeah, it was very odd. But you can watch back a lot of The Source, and The Source was huge for Rise to 7. It was a big expenditure, but also like it really worked. And I'm barely on it, which is a bit sad in the end, because it feels like I wasn't really documenting what was quite a special time. But at the same time, like maybe I would have realized earlier that I'd sort of let myself go a little bit.
Yeah. That makes sense. And sort of when you moved away, what did you move on to then? Did you have like a career break or?
I did. I had 18 months where I wasn't allowed to do anything else. And I'm so thankful for that. Because as soon as I left, because it took a long time for that deal to properly happen, there was more than just me and Carrie involved in negotiations. We had a minority shareholder as well. And it's a complex situation. That's how these things are. Especially because we didn't think about it in advance of what would happen if one of us wanted to leave. We didn't really have a mechanism to make that easy. I was like, I should probably go and do something, but I can't. And if I had been able to, I might have done that, and I wouldn't have done anything differently. It would have been a disaster. So I was forced to have some time off. It took, the longer I was off, the more settled I got to the idea of I don't need to be working and that kind of thing. I think you sort of feel like it's part of your identity as well sometimes. So it took a long time to sort of get to that point, and it was only towards the end of my restrictions when I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? What do I think I'd like to do? And had a really sort of the way that I operate. Usually, I made an Excel spreadsheet of pros and cons of what I would do next. And yeah, it was only when I was able to start working again that I started having some conversations about it, really.
Yeah.
What did you do to reset that work-life balance and, and your new roles moving forwards? Is there certain kind of barriers or kind of rules you've put in place for yourself so that you don't find yourself kind of falling back into those unhealthy habits?
It's one thing that's very different is I'm going into a new role having made exercise a part of routine. Yeah. So it's not a case of like, I wasn't doing it before and now do even less of it. It's like I've got some sort of hard, unmovable times in the week that I'm gonna do that kind of thing. I have the hard stop as well when I do bedtime, bath time, etc. with Max. So I keep away from work in the evenings, and I'm really lucky that Ride Shotgun is not a employer that is like, you need to be in the office, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. It's very autonomous in that sort of way, which helps. Took a bit of getting used to, definitely. Like I came, I don't think I fell back into old habits, but I'm like, well, I certainly wasn't, as healthy as I was during the time that I was off. It's just taken a bit of getting used to, but I feel feel back into it. I think the exercise thing is a big thing. I think the not drinking at home is a big thing as well, definitely.
Nice. It's really interesting. I guess for someone that doesn't have the luxury, I guess you could say, of having that like 18 months off, but they want to, you know, readdress that like work-life balance, what would you say would be the biggest things that someone could do to help prioritize their health and life outside of work?
I think one of the really helpful exercises that I did when I had a therapist for a little while, which was helpful, and I'd recommend that. One thing that we did was an exercise where we looked at a lot of things in life and go, what's always helpful, what's sometimes helpful and sometimes bad, and what's always bad. And there are things in your life, certainly in my life, I thought, it turns out that's always bad. And one of those things was Twitter. Twitter is terrible. It's even worse now, and it's not called Twitter, but that I found was a constant source of anxiety.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I thought about, okay, what's the good things about it? Why am I still there? And it's almost like, it's like sunk costs, right? You've got all these followers and you think, well, I've spent a lot of time on that. When I started my career, it was a big thing to try and, you know, be a big deal on Twitter. So I remember spending a lot of time on amassing those followers. So it feels quite hard to walk away from. That was one, the social media thing generally. I've really kind of redressed what I do. But it was only when I thought, okay, what's good and what's bad and what's sometimes good and sometimes bad, and start to have a little bit of a hard look at how I use those platforms. Lots of other things like that. But I think that's a really helpful exercise. Just like the number of things that you do just because it's habit, that you think, actually, there is no upside to that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So almost like just kind of checking, and I guess it's reflective of today. Like, you know, you look at certain feeds all over social media and sort of Twitter in particular, and, you know, you've kind of got the world's problems at your fingertips almost, and you see in both sides rip each other apart. You've got people saying hateful things, you know, you're seeing things that you probably shouldn't see.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real problem today, especially for young people. And I think it's concerning, and, you know, I don't have children, I'm not a parent, you know, you are. It's concerning how much we're letting that stuff into our, you know, the next generation's lives. You know, people are getting phones earlier than ever to, you know, and they're joining Facebook and social media at 9-10 years old.
Yeah.
And I've always thought, what are the impacts of these platforms, and is it causing a mental health crisis? Because I think a lot of adults, and, you know, it's less talked about, I guess, a lot of adults are struggling with it, you know, where they're on these platforms and it's affecting them, you know, comparison theory, you know, comparing your own life to someone else's because they've got a nice car and a nice house, but they're portraying the best image of themselves, or seeing hateful things online that bring you down or turn you against other people with different views. What are your thoughts on that sort of stuff? Like, because as marketers, you know, we work on these campaigns, we support these platforms, we invest in them, we create content for them.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like modern social media and how it's being handled at the moment, and what it's doing to sort of people's lives?
I think it's best not to think about it. And I think the digital PR space is a really interesting kind of example of this, because you see a trend there that I think is very reflective of social media, which is you start to see a few agencies who are like, do you know what? We're not going to pitch to the Mail and the Sun because they're always bad. But the Guardian isn't better; it's just left-leaning. And actually, a lot of the platforms, a lot of the media generally are they're very much of a muchness. They have different amounts of hate, but they still have some there. So I think there are certain, you know, you're in this career where you can't escape the fact that some of it is good and some of it is bad, and you cannot take responsibility for all the bad stuff, because you're not going to put an article out there that is slandering someone, that's causing violence, that's, you know, inciting a riot or whatever, whereas there might be someone on that exact publication that day who's doing that exact thing. The same is true of social media. The same is true of most of the connected world. And I'm not saying it's like you've got to be a good citizen and just sort of ignore all of the other stuff. But, you know, Twitter is a wonderful example of a business that used to have a huge content moderation team stopping a lot of the hate happening. That's just turned that off and saved the cash. You can't fight that fight on your own when, you know, there are businesses with billions of dollars invested in it and PhDs working on it who have decided just not to bother. It's very that sounds like a very cynical answer, I'm sure, but
No, I completely agree with you. And like, I think a really important conversation to have really regularly in the digital PR space is how we can be more responsible PRs and put out stories that are doing good where possible, but equally portraying our clients in the right way, putting out stories that aren't doing any damage, that are rooted in 100% fact and, you know, have accurate methodologies. There's so much we can do to be responsible PRs and like not feed this machine of, well, nonsense really on some social media platforms and in press and the media as well.
It's hard to think about, I think, like where that thought process goes and where it ends. Because if you're an agency that goes, I'm not going to pitch to the Sun, my view is that if you are then going to work with a client whose audience is, that is where their audience is, you know, that's the main publication. I always feel like well, I think I'm better than that client. They're working for a business that is full of people who read the Sun. You know, like when do you actually sort of draw the line and say, do you know what? This is a massive publication. It has a huge influence on the country, regardless of whether I work with them, for them, against them or not. It's kind of there, and I can't just ignore it and tune it out and pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. Like, I've had clients previously who have said, I don't want to be featured in XYZ publication. And that's fine. I don't think there's ever been an instance, but we have had conversations about it when people in my team previously haven't supported certain publications and they haven't necessarily wanted to be involved in particular clients because, you know, their audience are the type of readers that would want to read the publications that they'd be pitching to. And I think there is like a delicate balancing act to be had to make sure that your team are happy, clients are happy, and that we are kind of doing good in the marketing space as well. It's ever changing and it is quite difficult to manage, but I think it's conversations that you've got to keep having to make sure that you are doing the right thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you don't have those conversations, my first agency, previous agency, we had, my first clients were Wonga.com, 4 bingo sites, a poker site, and then a Russian company that wrote essays for university students who didn't want to write their own. And I thought, that's terrible. And we really grew up. But when I look back on it, our final clients, we were doing UX for the Tory party. We had Shell. You know, it's like, we might have grown up, but were we doing better? I don't know. You know, until you start having the conversations, if that's not a bit of the business you work on, and, you know, certainly if you don't feel like you're in a seniority suitable to actually say, do you know what, I don't really want to do that.
It's a really interesting conversation around gambling clients and doing digital PR in particular for gambling clients. In my first agency, we had a number of gambling clients and it was so difficult to PR. It was soul destroying at times because you'd have journalists turning around and, you know, spewing absolutely awful things back to you. But they were our clients and we had to like land coverage for them, and it is really difficult. And I've been lucky enough to have not worked on those kinds of clients since then. But I know that a lot of people do, and it is really, really hard space to navigate.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, closing up that conversation, I'm sure, but the journalist who's saying, oh, you really shouldn't be working with that client, will then go and publish something equally horrific.
It's kind of the same because we, you know, many, many years ago, we used to work with a lot of financial companies, and that included like companies that offered bad credit loans and guarantor loans. And, you know, I come from like a family, you know, I've not got a family of wealth. You know, a lot of my family come from like council estates. You know, they struggle a lot. They've either struggled with addictions and things like that. And, you know, we were doing all of this like really great SEO and paid media work for this company that offered these bad loans. You know, these were like loans that exploited the most vulnerable people. You know, where someone would be desperate to buy food or fix a boiler or maybe just finance a little bit of hope to get a holiday or whatever, or get married. And I always sat with the team and was like, we're targeting people who are at their lowest, and it doesn't sit right. And everyone felt the same, but it was kind of like, well, this is our job and this is what we're doing. And it's like, do we have a choice over it? And it's kind of, we started asking those questions, and then, you know, inevitably that client went away and they started doing things on their own and whatnot. But I think for us, it raised a big question of like, sometimes as an agency, like, you know, you make decisions on who you work with based on the growth of your company and your targets and, you know, paying people fair wages and keeping the business ticking over. But I guess you don't take enough time to reflect on who are we actually working with, and what impact does that have on the world. And I think, yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah. When we were at Rise at 7, when I was at Rise at 7, we crowdsourced that from the team. So whenever anyone joined the business, we asked them, who are your 5 dream brands that you want to work with? Then we put together a league table that was, you know, somewhat public, but, you know, certainly most people in the business would have known about it, of Rise at 7 stream clients. And, you know, we made a big fuss of the ones that we won. But it also meant that in an interview, I would have to say, so the first thing, you know, we work with Boohoo. That's our biggest client. They would pay your wages and they pay the wages of 10, 15 of your colleagues. If you have a problem with that, they aren't going anywhere. So, you know, this is probably not a good fit for you. And we just have to head that off immediately. But then secondly, we'd look at the league table and say, just so you know, we ask everyone who they want to work with. And the third on the list is Pornhub. And this is a 75% female business. This is not just a bunch of lads who are saying we'd like to work with a porn site. This is the will of the people. And therefore you're working with people and you're joining a business that if Pornhub called up, or arguably a similar business called up and said, could you work for us? We'd have a little party. If that's not the sort of business that you want to be part of, we should, again, you know, it's probably not for you. And there was obviously some really like hard lines. Like they didn't want to work with e-cigarette companies. They didn't want to work with 3 or 4 other industries. But, you know, porn, cool with porn, quite happy with porn. So, you know, it's every business is different. It's quite difficult to make a judgment on. I don't think you should make a judgment on other agencies and what they're doing, because there's all those circumstances that have led them to where they are. But you know, you've got to do the right thing by your team. Sometimes the right thing by your team is keeping them employed and taking the money from someone that you don't like. Sometimes it's, you know what, we actually have a choice here because going is good. And, you know, right now, I think a lot of businesses will probably take the money, and I think they're probably right to do so.
In this landscape, agencies are facing more pressure than ever to show how they're adding value for clients. Like, what do you think are the best ways agencies can show clients how they add that value?
I think there are a few ways that agencies generally add value, right? So compared to other agencies, because I think this is a thing. You might lose out to another agency, but you might lose out to in-housing. You might lose out to ChatGPT, whatever it might be, some other kind of alternative thing. And I think there's an opportunity for kind of bundled services. That seems to be a trend that's beneficial at the moment. So if we can, I'm not saying that every agency needs to be a full service agency, but if we can tick a few boxes, right? Most agencies are creating content. And if you're creating content and they're creating content and they're creating content and they're creating content, but if you're creating content and actually that content is used in a few different ways, there's cost-saving benefits. But really for brands, for the clients that we're working with, there's huge benefits in terms of the amount of time and bandwidth they have to spend on it. And so, like, just recognizing when a brand is spending on doing all of these other things that look pretty similar. And I think, like, the absolute archetype of that model is PR and digital PR, because it's the same.
Yes.
you're talking to the same journalists, you might well be doing the same campaigns. And there's a huge opportunity for agencies to reconcile that at the moment, because the big challenge for them is usually you've got digital PR people who aren't trained in speaking marketer. That's the thing. It's not that they can't do the job. It's not that they don't get the results. It's just that what if instead of talking about links, we spoke about awareness, consideration, preference, these kind of things, all the metrics that, you know, some of the people behind the big doors in the organizations are measuring. You totally influence them. It's always been there. It's just, I think, recognizing that the world doesn't need more silos at the moment, and brands certainly don't. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities, is joining that up, whether it's with other agencies, whether it's internally, whether it's just kind of recognizing that if you're doing this thing over here, SEO and UX look pretty similar nowadays. There's lots of these things that are going on. So I think there's an opportunity to add a bit more value just by, you know, using what we already do in a slightly different way.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
I wanted to talk to you. There's a lot of really great things actually that you've posted on LinkedIn about sales and agency, and I think there's some fantastic advice that you've put forward there on how businesses can sell better and how they can communicate better. Because ultimately, there's a lot of there's a mixed bag out there in terms of the way agencies do things. You know, value-based pricing or hourly pricing. Like, who's involved in the pitch stage? Do you do cold calling? Do you do emails? But I think it's fair to say there's a lot of agencies out there that are struggling at the moment, and they're struggling with profit. They're struggling with hiring. They're struggling with getting the revenue in place, generating leads. These are some of the things that you're seeing, and what would your kind of advice be for businesses in that situation?
That's definitely true all over the industry. I don't know about every country. I think the UK is probably feeling it a little bit based on some of the choices that we, the people, have made over the last decade or so. But that's how it is. We've got to live with that. I think, it's tough at the moment. I think if I compare Rise at 7 and Ride Shotgun, they are opposite businesses in the way that they do things. Rise at 7, all inbound; Ride Shotgun, all outbound. Rise at 7, organic growth; Ride Shotgun, growth through acquisition. You know, loads of these levers that you'd look at are just flipped exactly to the other end, and both can work. I think we talk about value-based pricing and, you know, alternative ways of pricing as being the answer, and there isn't one answer.
No.
I think it's very much a, you know, you've got to price the client, not the job. You've got to have a portfolio that makes sense, right? So you don't want to be all betting it on black. You want to have a bit of a mixture of how you do things, because that kind of spreads your risk, and that's a good thing. But I don't think there's one answer. I think the thing that's closest to an answer is commitment and consistency. Like, if we tried to do the other end a bit and do all of the other stuff that Rise at 7 used to do, it wouldn't feel very natural to us, and it wouldn't be easy to flip the whole business's growth engine in that way. So we've got to kind of recognize what we're good at and play to our strengths. I think that's true of a lot of agencies. Like, they will have a bunch of strengths. If you think about some businesses have a very strong thought leader at the top of the agency who's got some really strong ideas and expertise, and actually it makes sense to lean into that and kind of do that kind of inbound model. Some businesses have got someone who's very much a people person who wants to get out there and talk to everyone and just understand everyone's problems, and maybe the other side of things works for them. So it's different in every business. I think the real difficulty is when agencies kind of try and do a bit of everything, don't fully commit to any one thing, and especially when they kind of compare themselves against other businesses that are doing really well at this one thing, and not taking the time to understand why it is that they're good at that and what they're bad at as a result of it, because they might be some things that are propping your own business up.
The inbound and outbound stuff is really interesting to me, because I suppose I never thought about it that way for like different agencies doing different things and them doing well at one thing and not necessarily both. And I've always seen, like, because like internally and like externally, people have conversations and they're like, well, Rise at 7 aren't advertising, or they're not like number one in the rankings because they probably don't need to be. And obviously Carrie is a very personal brand driven, she's got a really good personal brand. She's out there, she's doing stuff. It's like, do you think one is better than the other, or is it the case of you saying that it really depends on what type of agency you are? And if so, how do you define what works best for you on either side?
I mean, if you're asking if I was to start from scratch and say what's the way I would do things, it would be inbound. It wouldn't be Google, by the way, right? Because if you Google SEO agency, as you assume some clients might do, the top 10 is 60% garbage most of the time.
Yeah.
And clients aren't stupid. They're going to open the first 4 listings and go, hang on, that's not a real business, surely. About half of those. And then they'll just give up. I don't think bigger clients choose business off Google in SEO agency anymore, just because it's been ruined by SEOs, basically. So I don't think that kind of inbound is the same as it used to be. I think social media is a big thing, and that is one of the ways that people sort of choose an agency. If it's a choice between personal brand and kind of agency brand, the downside of agency brand is just that LinkedIn and platforms like that throttle pages. So your personal page goes very far, your company page doesn't. You've got to pay for it, basically, which is fine. You can pay for it. That's a totally legit way of doing this kind of thing. The reason personal brand, I think, is probably one of the better ways to do it is just because it's free. And that's all. People buy from people. That's really good. But I think that kind of inbound really just comes down to brand. It's like, what is the brand that you are selling, your brand, your agency's brand, etc., and just being front of mind, being associated with the things that you want to be associated with. Outbound email marketing, for example, it's a lot like social media, really. It's just another inbox. You're just reminding people you exist in the same way as you are on LinkedIn, same way as you are on Blue Sky, whatever it might be.
No, that is interesting, because we, like years ago, and we've had this from clients before where they're like, well, if you're an SEO agency, why aren't you ranking number one in Manchester? And it's like, well, we don't need to, because it is a load of rubbish. And what works for us and what works for you is two completely different things. And, we've been in the position before where we've been in the top 3 for SEO agency Manchester. It is a load of garbage. And it's mainly small, not small business owners, but kind of like startups, t-shirt companies, things like that, where people are like, oh, I'm a bit lost and I'm told I need to work with a marketing agency. I used to love having conversations with people on the phone about this, because we would get an inquiry and I knew immediately from looking at their website that they put in the contact form that they were a little bit too small for what we were after. Now I'd have a conversation with these people and they'd say, I've got £100 a month, spend £500 a month. And I think a lot of people's natural reaction is like, oh, fuck's sake. And, they go off on one. But I always used to give them advice. And I always used to say, well, you know what? I want to lead you on the right path. And I was like, you don't want to work with an agency right now. I said, you're a business owner and you've got a little bit of money to invest in your business and you're trying to get more leads or sales online. At the start, you need to learn about all these things yourselves and almost do everything at the beginning. Or maybe you've got like a partner who you go into business with, so you have a little bit of help, and then build it up from there. And then you can start hiring people and working with an agency. Because I always used to feel sorry for those who would spend £300 a month on some freelancer or an agency that were willing to take their money and pretty much not achieve anything at all. It's really hard to at those levels. I would always, when I have a call like that, I would always used to say, like, if I were you, I wouldn't hire us. No.
Totally, right? You could give us this much money each month and fine. But that's not what I would do. I would probably be investing in this. A lot of the time it was like, you want to do digital PR, you should probably be investing in probably Instagram ads or some kind of performance marketing where there's a direct return and therefore you can scale it. And you want to build a social following, etc. And, come back in a year, and that would make sense. Sometimes people did. They come back in a year. They had a load more money because they'd made some. So it's a much more positive conversation. And you've got that position of expertise where someone's like, you gave us good advice before, and I'm like, I'll give you good advice again. It's okay. And maybe it's the right fit now, and maybe it isn't. But It's just like, talk to these guys, talk to those guys. There's lots of agencies out there doing really good work that would be much more suitable for a business like that.
Yeah. And we've always benefited from the inbound side, mainly, I would say, over the past couple of years. And that's come from existing clients, whether they've expanded or given referrals. It's come from like people who I met 5 years ago.
Yep.
At previous agencies who were like, oh, we're looking for an agency. And I know, I see the stuff you do on LinkedIn. And I always find that really interesting. And it's really hard to kind of decide, like, well, in the future, what does agency sales and lead generation look like? Is it going to be a sales BDM team making phone calls and sending cold emails? Or is it going to be a bunch of experts actually building a personal brand and getting involved and being a bit more independent? Where do you think it's going in the future?
I think the people who say that referrals don't scale are the people who are trying to sell you something other than referrals, generally speaking. Rise at 7 was built off referrals. It grew as fast as most agencies can ever grow, and it was referrals mostly. So the way to scale referrals is be out there more. Sometimes that's physically, sometimes that's on social. But it's just a lot of the people who were referring us were people that I couldn't really say we knew. Like maybe haven't met that person. Like we got an inbound, what we would class as an inbound, a referral from someone who used to be at Tesco Bank, and I worked for an agency that worked for Tesco Bank, but we didn't work in the same bit. And I think probably I was posting on social, he was working with my agency, he followed me on social, and then that's how it came to be, basically. And I assume that's probably how most of this stuff really happens. I think, like, if you're struggling to get a lot of referrals, then you probably need to get out more. That's how it is. And I'm not saying go to every networking event that you possibly can. It's like go to the right ones. Yeah. There's some wonderful events, especially in our space, right? And the obvious one being Brighton SEO. Brighton SEO is the gift that keeps on giving in agency sales, because you can spend half the year going, you're going to be at Brighton SEO. And that's a totally legit reason to get in touch with people. And you can arrange a beer, you can arrange a coffee, whatever it might be. I've had pitch meetings in the middle of Brighton SEO over lunch, and I'll probably owe Kelvin something, I'm sure. But but yeah, those kind of events are the ones that you sort of build your calendar around, and you go there because everyone is there pretty much. You get to catch up with some people that you just remind that you exist. You get to meet some new people. It's yeah. And then social media is just like a weird version of that, I think, sometimes. LinkedIn maybe a little bit. Twitter used to be like that. Maybe Blue Sky is like that. I don't know.
I don't know. I've not personally used it.
I've just signed up for it, so I'm excited to see where it's going to go. But
wasn't it built by the previous co-founder of Twitter? But he doesn't own it anymore.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, so it was supposed to be... So Jack Dorsey and Agarwal, what's his name? Agarwal, the previous CEO of Twitter before Musk came on, started Blue Sky as this kind of vision of what Twitter should have been. And it was kind of built as a sort of separate startup from Twitter to try and keep it as not this big commercial entity. But they were quite dodgy, so they'd spun it off separately, and now it's its own thing, not involved anymore. So maybe it could be that. Maybe it could be what Twitter was supposed to be.
Possibly.
We'll see.
It's already a much nicer place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop like a lot of my social media usage, to be honest. Like most of my time I spend on LinkedIn, to be honest, like
Same.
because one of the things that I'm trying to do is post more, but also come up with like some original thought as well. A lot of what I used to do in the past on LinkedIn, because I think the first time I heard the words personal brand were maybe like 4 years ago. And that's mainly in part due to Ash Jones, who I'm sure you've heard of before. He's one of the top experts in building personal brands for some of the top guys and girls out there in the world. And I was like, okay, well, how much do I need to post, and what do I need to post, and what do I need to say? So that's pretty much where I spend most of my time now.
Yeah. Ash trained Rise at 7 in personal brand.
Did he?
So
I had a feeling. I think he mentioned once that he was working with people at Rise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important that people have someone to work with on the personal brand, or is there an element that you need to kind of do it yourself a little bit at the start?
I think what Ash is wonderful at is giving you confidence. We worked with him. He set us up basically, and then we ran with it. There are going to be people who feel like they don't have time. They probably do have time, but feel like they don't have anything to say. They probably do, etc., etc. And people like Ash are there to draw it out of. And that's the job of a consultant, right? That's what we do. Like a lot of the brands that we work with probably could do what we do. They're not going to, but they probably could. So there's value in that. It's like the rented confidence that comes from working with a consultant like that, and it's the steer in the right direction. And there's always the tactical elements as well, right? So you've got in SEO, you've got the algorithm changes, you've got the how do metadata work, and all that kind of thing. In personal brand, it's like, tell me about the LinkedIn algorithm. It's the kind of same thing. The real value of someone like that is just kind of, okay, what will people actually find interesting? And some people can arrive at that on their own, and some people can't. I'm rate Ash. I think he's great. But
yeah, he is great.
Yeah.
I've never met him. I'd love to.
Oh, you should.
But I do love a lot of his stuff on LinkedIn. I've heard very good things about him. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing now and sort of how life is now, I guess.
So I'm at Ride Shotgun, which is a creative content agency. And it's about 200 people. We're in a few countries now, but most of our headquarters in the UK, and we're kind of expanding across America, particularly at the moment. And it's the agencies kind of come from a merge of quote unquote traditional creative agency and a production agency. And that's what a lot of the kind of historic work has been, which has been really interesting because that's the bits that I've not done personally. So my job is to kind of help them accelerate what they're already doing from a strategic point of view in the first instance. So helping brands to determine what is our brand and what should we be saying, and what's the essence of what we do basically. And then at the other end, like when we create all this content, what should we do with it? So when I've been in agencies from Brand 3 to Rise at 7, it's been, we've got some good data, we've got some good ideas, we can do something really cool, we get a client to sign it off, and we need to find someone to kind of make it, because maybe it's something a little bit more complicated from a design point of view, maybe it's physical and it needs to exist, maybe it's videography and we just don't have that, all these kind of production elements that I'm used to working with freelancers, or relying on the design team who are going to churn out the same few things. It's going to be a map, it's going to be a calculator, it's going to be a infographic, whatever. It's the bit that's missing from that's Ride Shotgun's really good at. So I've got this opportunity to kind of add the bits that I'm used to that mix and do the end-to-end thing in one place. But also it's really interesting just to learn about how it works, like what is involved in a proper shoot, and how do you scope it out, and how much is actually going to cost, and that kind of thing. So it's really cool, and some really good clients, some really good people as well. So it's a lot of fun learning some new stuff, for sure.
Yeah, I completely get that, because we, historically we've always been, performance marketing agency, so SEO, content, paid. Recently expanded into digital PR as well, and randomly, and this was a couple of years ago, we got approached by Yamaha Music Group, and I was like, it doesn't feel real, because we do work with some big brands, but that's like a really like strange one to come in for us just out of nowhere. And we started talking about them, and they wanted help with content, mainly video stuff, and we don't offer that. So we partnered with another company called Paragon Pictures, and they're based in Manchester as well. And we've done some amazing like video shoots for them, and we've just acted more as a consultant. So our whole proposition was like, okay, it's great shooting a video and coming up with a story, but have you guys thought about how you're going to distribute that, and how how you're going to advertise it? Have you thought about even the search engine optimization for the videos on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all that? And the answer was no. So we had like this weird opportunity to kind of jump in and be a consultant on that video project to make sure it did fit for like for advertising platforms, etc. it was really cool for me because we was on these big sets. It felt like we was doing a movie, and we had these big like drone arms. I was sending the team's pictures at the time, and I was like, "This is like it's got the camera on. It's a robot arm, and it just does the same movement."
Yeah.
So that is a lot of fun.
It is. It's so weird as well because obviously that kind of production thing's been around for decades, longer than digital. I think it's kind of the same when you're working in PR and you get a bit of print coverage. It's really exciting, isn't it? It's like,
it never gets old.
I know.
Planting a piece of coverage never gets old.
Yeah, it's nice, and I don't mean in the sense that it feels archaic. It's like you can see it, you can touch it. It's just really cool. Yeah, and I like going back to that like dream clients list. I'd always wanted to work with Diageo. That's been dream company forever, and we're doing some really cool shoots with Diageo over the last few months. So it's been wonderful to actually kind of get in close proximity to the brands that you're really interested in. If you were at Rise, you maybe love the fashion brands and stuff. I'm not a fashion guy, believe it or not. So it's cool to get close to them. HSBC being another one, right? I've always wanted to work with HSBC, so it's really cool from that point of view.
Nice.
What was your favourite creative campaign that you worked on or kind of were part of at Rise at 7?
My client, so we kind of, me and Carrie and Will, the PR director, we kind of, between us, were board sponsor of everything. And one of mine was Park Dean Resorts, and I loved all the Park Dean stuff, mainly because they were so nice. They were just really good people who wanted us to succeed for them and were keen to do stuff and were really happy to hear the ideas. And unlike some clients, especially at Rise, who are probably known for pushing the envelope a little bit, would go, could we make that bigger? So I would say my favourite one, I didn't go to the shoot, but the Royal Caravan was the favourite one for Park Dean Resorts because we pitched them an idea, which was a render. And they said, what if we gave you a real caravan? And just the excitement that was involved from the team, Ellie Ray in particular, but lots of the team were just like, we could do a lot with this. And I remember, and Will Hobson has got previous for this as well, right? But we got the shoot sort of mapped out and we had $4,000 left in the budget that we thought we weren't going to spend. And he spent it booking a Rolls Royce to take them there. And I did not sign that off. And then clearly, there's always unforeseen circumstances and, you end up going over budget. But it was just the excitement in the place for that campaign. And by that, I mean, not just within Rise at 7, but at Park Dean Resorts as well. They were always one of my favourite clients because they were it was very much a team effort. They were a great one to work with.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've seen loads of their projects you did for them.
Yeah.
Did you end up going through a McDonald's drive-through at that Rolls Royce by any chance?
That was a different Rolls Royce.
Was it a different Rolls Royce?
That was Nitin from Misguided's Rolls Royce.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Funny story about that Rolls Royce. Separate again, but a funny story. When we went for the onboarding meeting at Misguided, they were filming the documentary, the Inside Misguided documentary for Channel 4.
Right.
And we pulled up in Carrie's Audi Q3 or whatever it was into the car park, and the entire staff of Misguided was stood outside and cheered. And then when they realised it wasn't Nitin coming in his Rolls Royce, they were like, "Get the fuck out of the way!" And we nearly ruined the shoot for the TV show. And you can watch the documentary. I think still on 4OD or whatever it's called now, and you can see the moment that like 30 seconds earlier we had very nearly ruined.
No way.
Yeah. And they forgave us, though. So
yeah.
Okay. It went okay in the end.
That's brilliant. You can't beat those types of stories.
Yeah.
So
one of the great things about working in agencies, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's many that I can go over. But yeah, what do you think's kind of one of the the funniest story that you've probably had throughout your career? Where you've worked on a campaign and it was just...
The funniest story. Once we went to pitch for Bauer Media. This is at Branded 3. And rookie error, but we just assumed that because we knew we were going to Peterborough, the office was the one in their email signature. So we just turned up on time for a chemistry meeting. And it turns out Bauer Media have 2 offices in Peterborough. So we go into the office and say, we're here to see this client. And the guy who basically is trying to get us to this client is like, well, I don't know who that is, but took us up every single floor in this, I think, 13-story building, took us out the elevator and goes, hey, it's no, not here. And we got to the top floor and it was this lady's 60th birthday party. And they thought we were strippers.
Oh my God.
She thought that they had hired male strippers, which clearly not. But this awkward moment of, firstly, like, right, we need to get to another building in Peterborough. But secondly, like, we don't want to ruin this birthday party.
Yeah.
So just very politely making our exit and trying to get in touch with the client. So like, I think there's been a lot of mistakes today. I think we're in the wrong place, and just trying to head across town as quickly as possible. But I remember that one very well. That was mortifying.
That's brilliant. We had one because we work with a brand called PGL, and they offer like school trips, educational trips. When I was a kid, I used to go on PGL trips because we used to call them Parents Get Lost. But I'm from Derbyshire originally, so I know they have. Well, back then anyway, they had a lot of activity centres and things that we would go to as part of school, and they invited us to Scotland to open one of their new centres, which was previously a castle. So it was this huge site, and they just opened it, so they'd done all the rooms and they'd like retrofit kitchens and things in there, and installed all the zip ropes, and we were like kind of the first to try it. So all of the agencies that work with PGL were able to go on that trip. And immediately when we got there, like I had packed, because I knew we was doing some activities, so I had packed like some trousers that were waterproof and waterproof jackets and stuff. But the drive was very long, so I ended up like coming in my jeans. I had these really like skinny jeans on, like these awfully skinny jeans, like really tight. I don't know why I had a pair of those, to be honest. But we got there nevertheless, and as soon as we arrived, we were running a little bit late because this was a couple of years ago, and I'd just bought an electric car, so we had to stop and charge for a couple of hours. But when we got there was like, right, no time, we need to go. So I've got these jeans on, I've got this T-shirt on and this jacket, and I'm like, whatever, I'll just go. And it absolutely pissed it with rain, like the worst rainfall they've ever had.
Yeah.
So it was all muddy and slodgy. I had a pair of brand New Balance shoes on, so I got absolutely drenched, and I just looked like a rat in the rain. And because I'd only packed for like 2 days worth of clothes, the only things, well, I didn't bring another pair of jeans, to be honest. The only pair of trousers I had was my like countryside waterproof trousers. So I had to wear them for the rest of the trip. And we did a silent disco that night. And so I was like, we was all dancing and all you could hear is my trousers going in the room. And then someone also, like, because we had a couple of drinks as well in the castle. And there were a few of us that went to bed and a few of us stayed over. And someone vaped in the bathroom, and it set off the fire alarm because it's a graded building, listed building. We had all these fire trucks come out, and all the women were like, "Oh yeah, who's ordered the firefighters?" And they thought it was like some sort of stripper thing as well. So I immediately thought of that when you was telling that story. Yeah. But that was brilliant. I love stuff like that. You can't beat it.
We've got one more funny story. Go on. What's yours?
Oh, from me?
Yeah, from you. Yeah.
Oh God, my funniest story.
Doesn't have to involve strippers.
I actually don't have one that involves strippers. That's one that's missing. It's yet to happen. Oh, a good one actually. This was me and Beth Nunnington went for a meeting with Oliver Bonus down in London, and I had been left to book the hotel rooms. First and last time I was allowed to do that. And we got there, and I'd booked what I thought was a really brilliant deal, but was in fact these horrible, like, pokey little, I think it turned out to be they were like accessible rooms, but there was cords everywhere in these rooms, and it was just awful. These rooms were absolutely disgusting. There was no windows, you couldn't see the outside world, and yeah, I think Beth thought that I'd like put her in prison overnight, and she's never let me live it down ever. And we were in these horrible rooms for a night. And I'm pretty sure that she only had a single bed as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a fish finger bed.
Like a fish finger bed, yeah. It was awful. I think it was it called the Z Hotel in London? Yeah, just warning. Yeah. Don't go for the cheapest room option.
No.
False economy, isn't it?
Yeah, that was...
Yeah.
Because if I remember rightly, I'd only been at Journey Further for a few months, and it was a really big deal, like going down to this meeting in London. And I was like, don't worry, Beth, I'll book the rooms.
Yeah.
It did not go down well.
I had a client, like when we went to Brighton SEO, we because we've always like booked Airbnbs instead. Like I've always had a preference over doing that. Like if people are comfortable with it, like everyone having their own room and their own bed and stuff. And we booked this penthouse, which was right by the beach, and it was only like a 10-15 minute walk because it was literally along the strip where Brighton SEO is. And so we had this like amazing view of the sea, and we had the hot tub on the outside terrace because it was at literally the top of the apartment. And one of our clients who had come to Brighton SEO she got a free ticket, you know, you put in a ballot, and she got booked at a really horrendous hotel, and she was shown, and this hotel was like £150 a night as well. Yeah. But because she had to go through like a process with a corporate team, and they have policies on the hotels, she was like, I'm not staying in that room. I'm not staying. She was like, I'm going to book my own and like invoice it to them as expenditure. But yeah, hotels, sometimes I don't trust them sometimes. I'd always prefer an Airbnb. It's just much more fun.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. Like looking forward to 2025, what are you most excited about? What have you got coming up?
I feel like it doesn't feel like at the moment that there's an air of positivity because, you know, we were waiting for 2 elections and there's always a bit more stability after that. And it doesn't feel like that's happening in America right now. But generally speaking, you know, these things happen and things sort of get a bit more positive. So it feels like going into next year, I think there is a bit of a buzz, and it does feel like brands are getting a bit more open to spending money and doing a lot more exciting stuff again. So quite excited for what I think is probably going to be quite an exciting year again. I think the whole industry has had a couple of hard ones, and hopefully next year will be a little bit more fun. But I think, I think otherwise next year, from a personal point of view, it's just cool to be working on the brands that I've always wanted to work on and see some of that work come out. Definitely. I think while I've been at Ride Shotgun, I've not been able to share a load of the stuff that we've been working on just yet, but it's just sort of at that point where it's going live. So I'm quite excited to show the world some really what I think is cool stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, next year is definitely looking like a more positive one, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
The only way's up from here.
Yeah. Well, when you reach the bottom, the only way is up.
Yeah.
But it definitely does feel like this year has been... It's been strange for sure because, like you said, the elections that were coming up, and I think a lot of brands have been like, oh, where's the budget going to sit and what's going to happen with this and this. And so, yeah, hopefully we can start to see more of that positive engagement, because what I would love to see brands to do more of is just experimenting a little bit more, taking on braver ideas. I think it, you know, in every industry, almost even in the film industry, you've seen a lot of safe bets, sequels and remakes and things like that. And the same trickles down to business. You know, let's do more of what we know as well, and that's fine. But I'd love to see more of that new stuff and brands be a little bit braver in their pursuit.
Yeah, every so often you need a Jaguar rebrand, don't you?
Oh God, have you seen that?
I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what to think of it. Like on one side, I'm like, maybe it's like destroying everything they've built, but on the other, I think, well, actually, when I've bought a car, I've never really considered a Jag because I've always had the perception that's an old man car. Yeah. So maybe it's a really good thing for them.
Yeah, upset all the old men, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I saw some figure. Things have not been good for Jaguar for a while.
Yeah,
roll the dice. Why not? That's the ultimate bravery, I think.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
I don't think I've seen a brand do a transformation like that or dare to in such a long time.
Yeah.
But
I like when you see a lot of, particularly like fashion brands, like they do that kind of rebrand, but it's always just toned down and the logo looks the same as everyone else. And it just sort of feels like they lose their identity and don't get a new one instead. So at least they're doing something. It's cool.
yeah, I think Peugeot did one recently. I don't think it was as big as what Jaguar's done, and there's still a lot they need to release on that side. But Peugeot used to have that kind of brand reputation of like really cheap car, you know. I don't know what the slogan people gave it, but I know with Fiat it was like fix it again tomorrow, and Peugeot had similar kind of messages, I guess. They rebranded and they started to become like more of a sexy brand, and they looked, dare I say, a little bit more like Lamborghini.
Yeah.
But on the more affordable side.
Yeah.
And so like some of the cars that I've seen from them and the branded stuff, I'm like, yeah, that kind of really appeals to me, because it's not much of a flashy car, like to the point where people would think, oh, look at me. But it's not that cheap looking anymore where,
Yeah.
you know, someone's going to take the piss out of you. Because if I bought a Jag, I'd get called an old man. I mean, I used to have a Lexus and I used to get called an old man all the time for it. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. But maybe that's why they had to do what they did.
I think so.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens though. I think it's going to be a really good thing for them personally, despite everyone's opinions. But Stephen, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time, and
Thank you.
really excited to see what you do next and keep up to date with what's going on as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on.
If Pornhub called up and said, "Could you work for us?" We'd have a little party.